Here on the Colour of Country Life, it's fantastic to catch up again with Rabobank's Dennis Voznesenski. How are you, Dennis?
I'm good, Ricky. How are you doing?
Great, thank you. Look, let's start our chat about our interests for the cropping sector with canola, because it just keeps stealing the headlines. We'll talk about the other commodities shortly, but what are we seeing with canola and the market issues, especially with Ukraine? And then there's some other things happening around the world on this front as well.
Yeah, canola's been an interesting one, and we've all seen the incredible price rises for canola over the last year, over the last 2 years. And we were doing some forecasting of what might be ahead of us over the next 12 months. And we went, okay, well, what if it does start raining in Canada and their crop goes towards, an average level? In Europe, an average level as well. And in Australia, the start of the cropping season is looking pretty good. What if we're above average? Not as good as last year, but above average. It seems like the balance sheet starts to get back to normal and global stocks can actually build a little. But then you go, okay, well, despite the fact that it looks like there's stocks in Ukraine and it looks like they're going to be planting, there's a lot of question marks about how much of it they can actually get out of the country, how much they can actually export. But not only that, more importantly, a very large proportion of the global sunflower oil and sunflower seed volume comes out of Ukraine. And once you add in the fact that canola has to substitute part of that sunflower oil that will no longer be coming from there, the balance sheet looks just terrible as it did last year. And theoretically, by the end of next year, stocks will be just as low, maybe a little bit higher. And then you go, well, it's not guaranteed that Canada's going to have an average crop. It's not guaranteed that Australia's going to have an above average crop. And it just solidifies the fact that it's a very tight market for canola, and we're likely to see elevated prices for the next 12 months for it.
Yeah, and we saw markets, I guess futures markets, panic a little bit about Indonesia with their palm oil exports, which all feeds into that sort of food oil sector.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's an important thing to note. As we keep moving into the months ahead and food inflation keeps going up, there's going to be more and more countries and more governments who are going to put more intervention into markets. So they're going to say, we're not going to allow exports, or maybe they'll say we're not allowing exports at all, like they did in Indonesia for palm oil. They didn't say specifically for how long, and that might change. But that's the direction everyone's moving. Everyone's getting more concerned about supply. They're getting more concerned about food price inflation. Because think about it, if food prices go up, especially in a place like Indonesia, and you're in power, you're likely to get voted out.
Yes, and I think there's a presidential election coming there shortly as well, so that's probably got something to do with it.
Yeah, exactly. It's also a painful thing to do in terms of your economy, because stopping exports suddenly means that the people who produce palm oil go, well, I can't get a price. I can't get the international price anymore, so maybe I won't produce as much. So in the long term, these government interventions are not very sustainable, but that's regardless of, it's not the most important thing at the moment. The most important thing for them is making sure the population's fed and happy.
Now, looking at, say, wheat and barley, the opening rains have been pretty positive for farmers that have got that in the ground. Has there been anything on the market front that we can report that's of interest for them?
Wheat prices are quite positive, and if you look at the spread between wheat and barley, when China put those anti-dumping tariffs on Australia and barley started trading at a pretty big discount to wheat, somewhere from $80 plus. Now that's declined quite a bit, so barley's trading at a better discount to wheat. And again, looking in the 12 months ahead, there's going to be harvest coming online from the likes of Europe and North America as we move through the year. But it's still a very tight market in terms of relatively low stocks. Recently, about a month ago, everyone was saying that India is going to be covering the shortfall, and they're saying that they're going to have another record crop there, over 110, 111 million tons. And then suddenly, now there's commentary that it's gotten significantly drier over the last week and a half, and that production is not going to be 110. Maybe it's going to be 107, 105 million tons. And India won't be able to fill that export shortfall. It wasn't ever going to be able to fill all of it, but now it's going to be less that it could fill. So there are continued issues around the world, and continued issues in an already very tight market. And that'll support prices, even moving into Australian harvest.
What about just that stuff we talked about with canola earlier? To what extent does those that are feeding into the plant protein area, the pulses and the like, to what extent are they influenced by, I guess, these sort of palm oil restrictions, concerns about sunflower oil, etc.?
So you mean the manufacturers of the plant-based?
Oh, no, well, the producers, when it comes to prices, like do we see some of the soya bean, for instance, that starts getting affected by those sorts of movements on the sort of adjacent cropping, if you like?
Oh, of course. So soybean prices and palm oil prices and canola, they all, to an extent, move together. And we've been seeing that over the last year. Whenever there's issues with, palm oil not being able to be exported in large enough volumes, price of soy goes up. And it's important to note that a lot of all these vegetable oils, they get used in biodiesel in Europe. And when they can't use enough, when there's not enough canola around, they might use a bit more palm oil. When there's not enough palm oil around, they might use a bit more canola. So it all acts as this one big machine. And when there's not enough of one, it causes the price of all the other ones to go up as well.
Just lastly, I thought I'd check in with you about this mapping that's sort of bounced around the place about all these ships supposedly waiting to get into Shanghai or in other ports in China. Can we believe what we're seeing around on social media, that there's a big queue of them waiting to get into the country?
I think there would be a bigger queue than usual. A lot of the maps that I've been seeing on social media, I think it's the same ones you're talking about. Many of them in the maps included all types of ships, including shipping vessels, and a lot of them also didn't compare it to what it looked like a year ago or 2 years ago, so to the average. I think maybe it's not as bad as everyone expects, but it is still, of course, a notable issue.
Yeah, I reckon someone mentioned maybe there's some fishing vessels being counted in amongst all of that as well.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah.
That's right. It's always pays to delve deeper than just rely on a picture on social media.
And one thing for certain, though, it definitely doesn't help the issue around container availability. So while everyone was thinking maybe 2022 would be the end of it in terms of the issues with high container prices and availability, this will likely push it into 2023. But as you said, it's important to delve a little bit behind the image you might see on Twitter or LinkedIn and see what vessels are actually showing up on that map.
All right, Dennis, thanks very much. That's Dennis Voznesenski from Rabobank. Appreciate your time with us on Flow today.
Thanks, Ricky.